Kia ora everyone and good morning to our council meeting. Could I start by asking Councillor Tuaka to open us with a karakia, please?
Whakataka te hauk te uru, whakataka te hauk te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hia kia ana te atākura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora.
Kia ora, thank you very much, Councillor Tuaka. Do we have any apologies today for early departure or anything else? Appears to be none. I haven't been advised of any public forum. Is there any notifications of items not on the agenda? Appears to be none. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest for today's meeting? There are none. Just if councillors are reminded that as we work through, if any come to mind, feel free to raise them at any time. We move on to our confirmation of minutes, which for our council meeting of Wednesday, the 24th of June. And we also have the 27th of May. Yes, thank you, Councillor Naylor. They have all been circulated. Are there any questions of clarification on those? And actually, we will go page 13. We have our extraordinary meeting minutes as well. So are there any questions of clarification on any of those three sets of minutes? Councillor Naylor. Apologies, thank you. I was looking at the agenda. So two sets of minutes, thank you. Could I get someone to move that they're a true and accurate record? Thank you, Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Amboy. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. We now move on to, our Explore Pahiatua Community Committee minutes. Could I get someone to move receipt of those minutes? Councillor Petty-Webber, seconded by Councillor Corlett. Is there any discussion or questions on these minutes? Appears to be none. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. We now move to minutes of the Dannevirke Community Board. Also just want to acknowledge in the room Chair Nicola from the Dannevirke Community Board and Deputy Chair Terry from the Community Board. Thank you very much for attending. Is there anything that you would like to comment on in relation to these minutes? No. Could I have someone move receipt of these minutes, please? Councillor Amboy, seconded by Councillor Johns. Are there any questions or discussions on these? Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Your Worship. I attended that meeting, but I just wondered, given the depth of detail that's in here, what was the process they were going to be following in order to progress it, and what was the timeline? They had talked about a 1st of July kick-off, but do we know any further? Has there been any further information presented to either Community Board or us?
Is this in relation to the public forum of
Yeah.
that meeting?
Yeah.
Yes, we have a meeting with myself, the facilities manager, and members of the community group tomorrow, first thing tomorrow morning, to discuss their proposal. So council will be updated following that. Councillor Johns.
Yes. Thanks, Scott. I see this. Is it intended that an incorporated society would be established, or has one been established?
Unaware, we'll be getting more information and bringing that back to council. When it comes to the Deer Park, council made a decision to decommission. Council has been very open to alternative solutions, but it will require a decision coming back to council to rescind our earlier decision should we wish to do so, on the understanding of how that will work going forward. Any further questions in relation to those minutes? Appears to be none. We've got a mover and a seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We'll just move now on to the decision action items on page 37. Could I first have someone move receipt of those? Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Corlett. Are there any questions on the decision action items? Councillor Amboy.
Thank you, Ms Scott. I'm just curious to know whether the letter of consideration to the Minister is underway. It'd be good to have an update if it's still in the process. Thanks.
No, thank you, Councillor Amboy. Was that in relation to audit fees? That is still under consideration in light of the simplification of local government reforms and working out where we best try and influence central government. So that is absolutely still on the to-do list, but some other letters to the Minister have taken priority. Any further questions? Okay, all those in favour of receiving those, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We now move to item 11.1 on page 43, and this has been prepared by the Manager of Democracy Services. Are you wanting to speak to this, Ali?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report is just simply presenting a recommendation from the Dannyvirk Community Board seeking carryover of unspent funds from their budget this year to the coming financial year.
Are there any questions on this report? Councillor Tawaka first.
Tēnā koe. It doesn't seem to show how much we're looking at on this report. Was that a mistake, or because it's quite short? It's quite a short report.
The financial year is still underway, so we don't have the final figures yet. But it's not a large amount, but it's an amount that would be useful towards the Eastern Fountain project.
Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, my question was that just fund just for the fountain project? It wasn't for any other purpose, or?
That is correct. Great. It's been moved by Councillor Wallace. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Amboy. Is there any further discussion on this paper? Appears to be none. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We now move to page 45 of our agenda, which is item 11.2, the council briefing Waiti Water Statement of Expectations. So I'd like to invite up Catherine and Peter to the table, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Welcome, Catherine. Statement expectation is a statutory responsibility that we must have in order to progress Waiti Waters. It's required under the Local Government Water Services Act. We've followed a certain process around developing this since April. It's gone through multiple stages of drafts and development, going through both the board and the governance in terms of the shareholder and stakeholder forum. So it's been well thought. There have been multiple changes. There's quite substantial changes from the original draft, which was based on really the councils of what they have been doing. So this has advanced quite significantly in a number of areas. Probably the most important was the customer expectations and affordability, which have been installed in there as a requirement, but there are other things such as requirement for meters to be installed over time. So they're kind of firmed up on those aspects. What would you like to say, Catherine?
You've done a pretty good job, actually. Morena koutou, nice to see you again. I did have a couple of slides, but Peter's done a very nice job of summarising what I had in them, which was a little bit about the legislative context and the process we've been through. But would it be helpful for me to just sort of elaborate on that a little bit further, or would you like to move just to talk about the document?
Possibly where we are in the phase. Mm-hmm. This is not the final.
We're just working to get the presentation up, Catherine. Just while Ellie's doing that, as a tiny bit of background from our perspective, the original draft of the Statement of Expectations came back to this table in a workshop where we ran through that. That has gone through a couple of iterations amongst the stakeholder forum. And my apologies through to the transition team. We did have quite a few changes and suggestions within that. Those have been captured within this draft. So I just wanted to acknowledge the comments from this table to help us get to the point that we're at now. So 1 second as we... if I could just ask councillors in your in the hub, you will have a copy of the presentation. We might not be able to have it up on the big screen, but if councillors could perhaps follow along on the hub.
I'll
yes,
just
so
identify the slide numbers as we go through.
Yes, please. We'll just give councillors a second to find that and locate it. And me to find it and locate it.
In the process, we do cover that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Sure.
Oh, very good. Have we got all of that up? Almost. Very good. Yes, Catherine, feel free to continue. Everyone has it in front of them.
Okay, thank you. So just on slide 2 there, just a little bit of an overview of the things we'll talk through. I'll go through it relatively quickly because I know you've had multiple opportunities to talk about the content and things as a group, so just want to make sure that we cover off some key points. So as Peter said, we're on slide 4, the Waiti Waters Accountability Framework with the rather gnarly looking flowchart there. So as Peter said, the Statement of Expectations is part of a new legislative and regulatory framework for water services providers. It is a bespoke framework. It has some similarities to the rules for other CCOs, but it is a bespoke framework for water organisations. So it has a lot of specific and robust detail that mean that the parameters that these organisations operate in is pretty well defined, and from a shareholder perspective, you've got a pretty good basis to hold the organisations to account and assess performance. So at the at the legislative level, that framework sets out the objectives for water organisations, how they need to plan and report, some financial sustainability thresholds and requirements, and it introduces new economic regulation which puts water organisations pretty much on a par with energy and other utility companies. And so within the context of this, the Statement of Expectations, I think, is really kind of a foundation document that sets the planning cycle in motion, and so it is the core document that a lot of the other documentation and accountability arrangements really drive off. So we skip to just ahead to slide 5, covered the purpose of the statement. It's a document that governs a 10-year period, so it's got a reasonable long time frame on it. Importantly, in a multi-council context, which we're in here, it's a single set of expectations that are given to the company on behalf of all shareholders, so it's not 4 sets of expectations, one for each shareholder. And it is a requirement on the company to give effect to the statement through their own strategic planning. So it's a pretty high legislative bar. It's the highest legislative bar that could have been imposed. And so from that perspective, it's an important document for your ability to influence direction from a shareholder point of view. Just on slide 6 and 7, there are some requirements that must be in the document. Mandatory content, and then there's some optional content which can be included, and you'll see as you read through the document that in many cases we have included content that covers those key points. Excuse me. Obviously, the document's got to be consistent with the legislation and the regulation. It also has to be consistent with the foundational governing documents for the organisation, so in this case the shareholders' agreement and the constitution. And it cannot direct the organisation in an operational sense. So that's the sort of the baseline or the bar for what can and can't be included. If you skip ahead to slide 9, I'll just talk briefly about the process that we have been through to develop this. Under your shareholders' agreement, the statement of expectations is developed by the stakeholder forum and your representatives that you've appointed to the forum there. So we've been underway for a couple of months working on this, as you know, and we started as a basis looking at Selwyn Waters and EOI, the examples that for 2 water organisations that are, one's gone live, one's going live in next week, I think, so that's big big milestone for them. So we used those 2 as examples. The reason we chose those is because we'd had advice from people who'd been involved in the legislative process that these were good examples, and they showed us what the policymakers were intending when they designed the requirement for a statement of expectations. So we've gone through sort of April, May with various conversations with the stakeholders forum, and in early June, a couple of weeks ago, we had a joint session, which was a really great conversation from my perspective between the forum and the board, where the board got the opportunity to talk to forum members about how they saw the statement, ask questions, kind of clarify priorities and expectations. So I think that was a really good first joint outing, and I think really sets the tone nicely for a great collaborative relationship. You'll see in the document, I'm on slide 10 and 11 now, that we have structured it according to the 5 legislative objectives for water organisations, so tying it really nice and closely to what the legislation says these organisations have to do. And we've also considered performance and expectations over 2 time periods. Obviously, this is a kind of a unique period in this organisation's life. It's got some critical things it needs to focus on in the first year or 2, so we have identified those kind of early priorities under a transition phase, and then most of the expectations, however, relate to things that the forum expects to see delivered over the full 10 years. Last thing I'll say, just on slide 13, I'll just talk to the document structure. So it's in 3 parts. First part, the big strategic priorities or outcomes, essentially, that really will direct YT Waters and its planning and operations going forward. There's a section on the relationship between the organisation and the stakeholders forum and the kinds of ways of working that you would expect and want to see there. And then obviously there are the expectations themselves that are broken into those 5 legislative headings. So I will stop there. You have the full document, you've talked about it before, so I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you very much for that, Catherine. First question, Councillor Corlett, and then Deputy Mayor Wards.
Thank you, Mayor Scott, and thank you for the report and the SOE here. It's got a lot of detail in it. I had one question. With the high likelihood of the amalgamation of councils, specifically the Wairarapa councils and their share essentially of 3 of the 4 shares of the shareholding, how does that look for Tararua in the future if they move to just 1 shareholder essentially with 3 shares in the group?
Perhaps it's
Do you want to start? No.
through your worship. We've got 23% shareholding shares based on the number of customers connected on average. So that actually is reviewed from time to time as well. However, it does mean that the balance of the control will be in potentially a joint other owner who might be an amalgamation of multiple councils more than just Wairarapa. So say it's a Greater Wellington Regional Council kind of concept, then they would be the shareholder of the 76%, 77% shares. So we would become a minority shareholder in that scenario, but of course we might be amalgamated as well. So it might be another group that will be representing the shareholder, but that will be the split based on the current constitution and structure. However, all of the amalgamation concept would likely trigger a review of the constitution by the shareholders.
Just supplementary to that. Is there anything we can put in the SOE for the protections of this district's decision towards water? I know that it would possibly go off in a likely different direction to the other side, to the Wairarapa side. But is there anything that we can do in there?
Thanks, Councillor Corlett. It's probably not necessarily a question for the statement of expectations. That's probably more of a wider constitutional question, and we can potentially get more detail to you on the earlier council decision making around the shareholder agreement and the constitution of Waiti Waters. There are some provisions in there that do build in some protections, and that is about the shareholding number required for certain decisions. Not necessarily a statement of expectations piece, but an important piece nonetheless. So we'll make sure that we get you the information for that, if that's okay. Thank you. Deputy. Is there any further questions before we move to comments? Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Scott, the meters, you said that they've changed in the expectation or whatever we're going forward. They're going to want to put meters in at some stage, right? I hear the nightmares where they're $500 and they charge them $5,000. I'm thinking of the ratepayers of this district. Have we got pretty much along the same way of Councillor Corlett's safeguards in there?
You mean in respect, through your worship, the protection around metering, or?
Well, the cost of the cost of meters, right? We're spending ratepayers' money. Well, they'll be paying for it, but we've got to have some guarantee that we're not going to have what that cost is to them.
I might just open it for half a second, and then because I do absolutely understand what Councillor Wallace is saying, and when we look at the statement of expectations, and some of this came through very, very strongly from this table, is building in the expectation of affordability. So I see that personally as a key protection to make sure that money isn't wasted when it comes to large projects like that. But if there's any other comments, Catherine.
So there are some, as the Mayor said, there are a lot of references in the statement to affordability and efficiency and value for money, and so you really have to read it in the round in terms of how those priorities and expectations are kind of coming through there. There are also pricing principles in I guess there's two aspects to your question. One is the cost of the project to install the meters, and there are expectations in here around how capital projects are managed from an efficiency and a value for money point of view. And then, of course, there is the question about pricing from a customer point of view as well. And again, there are references in here around community affordability, and there are also pricing principles in the shareholders' agreement that set the expectations in the governing documents that managing affordability at a community level and for customers is an important part of the expectations and the direction of travel as well. So that the content around expectation around metering reflects the forum's expectation that the way in which prices are charged changes over time and shifts from capital value-based charging, which is pretty dominant in Masterton, through to volumetric charging. There's still a lot of work that has to go into what exactly that structure of those prices looks like and what the prices themselves mean for customers, but there's a really strong emphasis coming through here on affordability and efficiency as well, sitting alongside that expectation around
And
pricing.
I'll just make a quick comment and then pass back to you, Councillor Wallace, of the statement of expectations will be monitored by the stakeholder forum. So we have set within this document, and it's been accepted so far, or there's a level of comfort from the board, as a representative from the stakeholder forum, and as the alternate, I'm sure I can speak for the Deputy Mayor, that will be something we will be ensuring happens. So I would take a very, very dim view to a project like that with significant amounts being wasted when we will have an expectation laid down in the statement of expectations that will be monitored. So that's probably where the extra protection lies. But I'll hand back to you, Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Scott. No, I understand the reason for metering, but yeah, no, this is good that we have that cost because you've seen and heard around the Motu about how much these costs have changed to the ratepayers. So as long as that it's at the forefront of this room, which I'm pleased to hear it is, that's the main aspect where I'm sitting. Cost to the ratepayers minimal, and that's why we're entering into this whole arrangement going forward to scale. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Peter.
Yeah, Ms. Scott, one of the things that you presented to the wider group was that customer charter concept, so that there was clear understanding of what that interaction and the value of the customer first. The other is a communication strategy with customers, because just the change is significant. Bear in mind that roughly 10% of our ratepayers currently are charged volumetrically anyway, and it's inconsistent across all three other councils, with capital value being a principal collection method for Masterton, which isn't permitted after 5 years. It has to be eliminated, just as some of our small component of fixed cost wastewater has to be eliminated as well. Property values is no longer a method for charging, if that makes sense. So that means it's either unit pricing or volumetric. But we know to put volumetric in meters, that takes quite a lot of effort. You have to visit every single property that doesn't have a meter. And that's going backwards why we put a pause on our meter project, because we knew that we needed to be consistent with what the region, the Wairarapa Tararua area would look to under YT Waters. So the capital investment program is now YT Waters to manage.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter. Is there any further questions on this report? Councillor Amboy.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Just a really quick one. I'm just curious about who will be leading the education of efficient water use. Is that a collaboration between councils and YT Waters? Thanks. It's just on page 18.
So that's an expectation on YT Waters, so you will see that campaign. There's obviously work to do to determine what exactly that looks like, but that is an expectation on the company, so they will be doing that.
Excellent. Before we move into comments, I'll just have someone move move that the pre-adoption briefing on the Waitī Waters Statement of Expectations and the letter of response from the Waitī Waters Board be received. That is moved by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Corlett. We now move into discussion. Deputy Mayor Wards.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had the privilege of representing Mayor Scott at the joined-up forum that Catherine is referring to. So this was the first opportunity for the stakeholder forum to actually sit in the same room with the newly appointed board. I have to say I was very assured that the calibre of the directors that we have sitting around that table was fantastic. The engagement that we had with them as stakeholders, we chewed over quite a bit in this statement of expectations because they wanted to understand what affordability looked like to us. They wanted to understand what efficiencies, what we had as a context behind some of this wording. So there was quite a bit of debate. They asked really good questions and tried to appreciate the diverse thinking across the four councils that are part of this. I believe that we're definitely on the right track. They are very keen to understand and gain insight as they move through. They're a very hard-working bunch of people. I think that the stakeholders that were involved in their appointment can be very pleased with the future of this organisation, and I just want to acknowledge the efforts that you've put into this too, Catherine. It was a bit of a meeting of the minds. We didn't really know who they were, and they didn't really know who we were. But by the end of that particular session, I think they've got a very good appreciation of what we want to see for our district. So, thank you, Your Worship, for allowing me to speak to that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Your Worship. As you're well aware, I'm still in two minds about whether this is a good thing or not for us. What's happened has happened. But what I'd like to know is how will, and I take your comment that the board are very capable people and doing a hard job of working well together, etc. But how are they going to be assessed for performance? On what's the basis of the assessment of their performance? That it's non-competitive. Is there anything set down as to how they're assessed for performance?
So the statement, through Your Worship, the statement of expectations is the document that holds the board accountable. It is your critical document. So if there's a performance or matter that hasn't been covered in there that you need, now is the time to identify that and have that included. This is a briefing of the near completed draft. It's gone through 3 iterations now, probably more sub-iterations. So it's good. We know it's good compared to the other councils that have already gone ahead of us. The other thing, though, is that it can be changed. It doesn't have to be a 3-year document. In fact, you might find in 6 months' time there is something that is useful to have that hasn't been previously identified. Unlikely, hopefully, because we've gone through this thorough process. But this is how you require the board to perform and how they're going to report back to you.
Further to that, Your Worship, thank you, Peter. I appreciate that. But one could, in assessing the board's performance, they could develop a gold-plated system for the area, absolutely gold-plated, best in the country, that costs an arm and a leg and a liver to the users of the ratepayers, if you like. Not that ratepayers come into it, but and they wouldn't be able to be criticised because they've done a fantastic job. It's state of the art, system. But that's what I want to, how will they be assessed?
Thanks, Councillor Johns. It seems like we've slipped back into questions from debate, but they are important points. I suppose that is how the board will be measured, and you're talking about a gold-plated system. That is the tension that we've tried to create when it comes to efficiency and affordability. So for the board to be able to meet the affordability requirements, that would not allow a gold-plated system, because we know from managing the water assets ourselves that a gold-plated solution would not be affordable. The other thing that I just want to comment on is, sorry if you just jump your microphone off for a second, please. The other thing that I want to mention is that the board will be accountable to the stakeholders forum, and the stakeholders forum is accountable to each constituent council. The stakeholder forum, in effect, will employ the board, has the power to appoint, but also has the power to remove. The statement of expectations, I expect to be followed. It does have a high legislative bar, as Catherine mentioned before, but I do believe that we have perhaps more provision and more detail in our statement of expectations than what has been in some of the drafts that we looked at to first build this on. So there's not perfect protections, but I feel that we are well protected within it, and it will be strongly monitored. Just have a comment from the Chief Executive.
Through your worship, also just a note, so in the legislation, I mean, arguably there's more protections than there has been previously with councils. So Te Mata Arawai will be monitoring and are empowered with quite strongly in terms of the quality of the water supply, and the Commerce Commission has the ability to intervene and direct. So if you ended up with a water services entity which was going gold-plated and prices were going through the roof, I think the Commerce Commission would be stepping in very quickly to actually try and rectify that, along with the shareholders and all those pieces.
And actually, from a political perspective, we have seen a water entity come out with, not our one, but come out with some quite extreme expenditure, and that has had direct ministerial pressure put on them. So this will be watched quite closely. Are there any other matters of debate or comments? Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, firstly, I agree with Councillor Johns, but on page 51, that efficiency, there are good headlines in this document, and you read it through. But I suppose that, and this is a comment, I suppose at the end of the day, it's like buying a new car, then you find that it's got a dud. That particular model was a dud. So hopefully, you know, with all the due diligence your team's done, and we've got to be led here by our strategist there, which is Peter, that we're on the best stage going forward for the best outcome. So it is, you know, the comments from our Deputy Mayor there, that's reassuring, but as I agree with Councillor Johns, we're really not there until we're there. So hopefully, after all this time, we're in the right track, we're in this right space, and time's only going to be our judge here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, reading through and listening to your comments about the statement of expectations and the legislation and requirements and things like that, I'd say it's going to be pretty hard for any water entity to actually get outside of those and create a real problem. I think it's so tight, I'd be almost worried that it's almost too tight, so that innovation won't be allowed, where we might be able to get a gold-plated system for less, you know. So, yeah, to me, I couldn't, you know, and perhaps I'm too much of a glass half full sort of guy, but I think I feel quite comfortable with the statement of expectations. I think you've done a really good job on getting the points about affordability and efficiency across, and it's really encouraging to hear the calibre of the people, and when you read their bios and stuff like that, these people are going to need. I struggle to think how we could be any better served. So by you and the directors, that is. So.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Peter has a comment.
Yeah, so just to explain that one of the key reasons why we didn't do what other councils did and retain a business unit or create a single CCO concept was because we knew of the difficulties in complying with both Tararua and the Commerce Commission and the sheer constraints that were going to be placed on us, and so we needed a better way. That's where we landed. So that answers your question, Councillor. In terms of where I see the key documents headed next, you've got a transfer agreement to develop. We've got a strategy investment to develop. Those are the two, I think, key documents that will be developed subsequent to this one.
Thank you very much, Peter and Catherine. I'll just make a final comment. One thing I do note, though, is that this has been a collaborative process. So every step of the way with each of these documents came through the last council, and since this council's formation, every document and decision has come over this table. I want to reiterate the Deputy Mayor's comments about the calibre of the board. I think we are incredibly fortunate to have secured the board members that we had. I was very privileged to sit on their interview panel, and it was a tough decision of who was going to come on. They bring a very unique set of skills, and it is a very, very balanced board. I was also, and thank you to the Deputy Mayor for representing us when I wasn't able to go to that joint session. I was slightly concerned by the statement of expectations that there may have been some significant pushback, because some of this will be a challenge to meet. And I was delighted to hear the discussion, but also to have the formal letter from the board chair agreeing to the statement of expectations. I think that shows a collaborative process. These aren't expectations that are just being imposed, although they do set incredibly high standards for our ratepayers. And we do, as a stakeholder forum, expect to be tightly monitoring and holding the board accountable for performance against the statement of expectations. So with that in mind, we have a mover and a seconder for that report. So I'll call the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thanks, councillors. We'll just move now on to item 11.3, which is Waiti Water's establishment, transfer of approved funding 25-26 in the name of the Chief Strategic Advisor, Peter Wimsett.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we've had a technical point where we haven't budgeted quite enough in the current year, and it falls into the next financial year. To be careful about these things, I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that we've got this commitment that is incurring cost rapidly with the transition team. We've got multiple external contracts in place to deliver on this program, and the timing isn't perfect, but we need to continue making payment to South Wairarapa as the principal agent who's looking after the costs for the respective four councils. And this report is just seeking that authority essentially 6 days early in terms of financial year. But we want to be absolutely clear on what the costs are and how they are being incurred.
Thanks, Peter. Question from Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, just quickly, there's no, from what I read in the report, there's no change in the overall costs. It's just a timing issue. And on 4 days, there's no financial impact to us by doing this now, is there really? So
No, not particularly. No, great, other than cash flow.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Naylor. Any further questions? Could I please get someone to move recommendations 1.1 down to 1.4? Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Is there any further discussion or debate? Put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We are at 10:15. We will now break for 15 minutes and be back at 10:30. Welcome back. I just want to introduce Linda Stewart from NZTA. Thank you very, very much for coming along and giving a briefing to councillors. So I will hand the floor over to you, Linda.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much, councillors. And thank you very much for affording me some of your precious time. I know that you have a lot of big topics on your agenda and to work through, so I do really appreciate carving a bit of time for the most exciting of all topics, land transport. For those that I haven't met before, my name's Linda Stewart. I'm Director of Regional Relationships for NZTA Whakakotahi for the Central North Island. I'm responsible for Taranaki, Manawatu Wanganui, Hawke's and Tairāwhiti, and all of our key relationships, partnerships and performance across that big swathe of the Central North Island. I work with 18 of our local government partners and responsible for our iwi and hapu relationships, as well as all other key stakeholders across the region. The purpose of today, I know that you have the pack in your agenda, so want to make sure that we allow plenty of time for Q&A of what's important and of interest to you. But this is a bit of a kind of refresh or rebriefing on all things of the machinations of land transport funding in preparation for the 27 to 2030 National Land Transport Programme. But I think as well the timeliness of this korero as you look forward into the future, particularly from an affordability, from a structural perspective, and what's important to your communities when it comes to their connection within your district and then further afield, will be really critical for you to consider. I'm happy to take questions, maybe at the end, if you could jot them down. Just they may get answered as we move through. And I'm happy to take questions on the presentation, but if there's burning other questions about NZTA or transport, I can do my best. If I don't know, I'll find out. So just a bit of a refresher, how we tend to come into contact or work is through all things state highway or local road investment, but NZTA's statutory function is a lot broader than solely that. So we're also the regulator of the land transport system. We also co-invest in the public transport system. We manage driver and vehicle licensing, both commercial and private, as well as the planning, investing and funding in the roading network as well. So it's a very, very broad span that we're responsible for. Our current structure, and I say that as we're having a little bit of a structural change across the business, but broadly that outlines our core areas of function and responsibility. And many of you in your team will have seen and come into contact with members of our business across those areas. We have around 2,500 people in NZTA. About 650 of them are based in Palmerston North. That's where I'm based. Sorry, that's our second largest office for NZTA, the largest being in Wellington. We have a nationally led way of working, but very much regionally informed. So we have our 5 regional leadership teams that are all based in the regions that we are responsible for. And that is to ensure, as well as taking a national view of the land transport system, that we as a business also understand the impact and the complexities at a regional level of those decisions. So what's important to Auckland doesn't override or translate into what's important for Dannevirke, for example. This is the one I just want to kind of reinforce. So you're aware that NZTA is a Crown agency, and as such we are required to give effect to government policy statement. Our government policy statement on land transport is developed by the Ministry of Transport and the Minister of Transport. And it is them that set up what they want to achieve in that time period from the investment in the system. We are then required to give effect to that. So I guess what I'm signalling is that when a GPS is issued, when it comes out for consultation, as governors of your district and also at a broader, at this stage anyway, Manawatu Wanganui level, it is very, very important that you feed into that consultation process so that you can influence and have your say on the government direction. Because if it doesn't feature in that GPS, we can't give effect to it. We can't spend that money on it. And I know that that's sometimes where the tension arises between us as a Crown entity and yourselves in local government as to, well, our community, or we really want to do this. We can't if it's not featured in that GPS. So you really need to think about where you can influence as a council and as governors. We have a swathe of legislation that we work within, primarily the LTMA, the Land Transport Act, is the key one, and that really clearly outlines our 3 core functions that you can see there. We also have to, and are required to give effect to a number of other areas of legislation, for example, like establishing toll roads, which we'll not dwell on, and also things around driver licensing, vehicle requirements, those aspects. We'll just move on, GPS, I think I've spoken enough about that, but we are going to dip back to that a little bit because actually the role of NZTA is fairly prescribed and not everybody is quite clear on that. And this is again where we can come into a little bit of tension as to why are we not able to get the amount of funding that we've applied for or for what we want. And we'll just help you understand that in a little bit more detail. But here it is where we get our funding. And that's the kind of mission critical part for us. Our funding comes from the National Land Transport Fund. That is a hypothecated fund, and that is solely funded through fuel excise duty and road user charges. We get a tiny little bit you'll see from the other aspects on the left-hand side. But we also as well get budget appropriations or Crown top-up funding, which over the past 6 years in particular, the requirement to top up the NLTF by the Crown has been growing. The NLTF has been fairly stagnant against inflation and I guess against cost escalation. So what we were able to buy through the NLTF 6-9 years ago, like many of you experience day-to-day basis, has got smaller and smaller. The NLTF will also be impacted by if the government decides to increase fuel excise duties or hold them, similarly with road user charges. So we have quite a fixed amount of funding to be able to invest in everything everybody wants to invest in. So it puts us in quite a challenged collective position. You'll also be aware that, of course, as co-investment partners, you do put into your co-investment share as well through our agreement on FAR rates. The monies that we do get through the NLTF and also the outcomes that the government are seeking to achieve through the government policy statement, we have to then decide, with everybody bidding into that fund, what are we actually going to invest? Because everybody wants more than the fund is able to deliver. So we have to have a mechanism to prioritise that investment. That is the investment prioritisation framework that helps us prioritise but also evaluate the bids that come in for funding. So the bids that your team, your officers put in every 3 years. We do have a peer review of that, and we do have MOT and local government around the room so that it is a transparent and robust process on how investment is prioritised. And just on this one, it's a bit of a full slide, but I mentioned that we've got the government policy statement, and that then outlines through the NLTF how much money we've got and what we want to spend it on. It gets even more prescriptive than that. Within the GPS, it actually outlines what we can spend that money on by these 12 activity classes. And more prescriptive again, we are then set the minimum we're allowed to invest in each of those activity classes
and the maximum. And that is set for us through the NLTF and the GPS. So our discretion and our decision making is within that boundary. A really practical example for you all, because I know it is very important here, but left of field perhaps, is footpaths. So within this GPS, the walking and cycling activity class got really squeezed so that we could continue to invest more in the maintenance of our local roads and the maintenance of our state highway. So they put more money in those activity classes. Walking and cycling got compressed. And so we are only allowed to then make the decision between the minimum and maximum that we can spend that on for what everybody wants to achieve with walking and cycling in their districts and across the state highway network, like Te Ahu, for example. So you can see here immediately why then, when we had so many bids for both the maintenance and improvements of footpaths, why there was so little funding available. And yes, we have to make that decision and we stand by that, but it is very prescribed for us by the time it gets to this point. The National Land Transport Programme, you'll all be familiar with that. It has been the largest investment in the land transport system in this NLTP period of just over 32 billion, which is not insubstantial. I would note that that has been primarily focused on the roads of national significance and on the maintenance and resilience of our state highway network and our local road network, which is why, again, we've seen those other activity classes squeezed in terms of their funding attributions. The Regional Land Transport Plan is probably the mission critical part, and your Regional Transport Committee, which the Mayor sits on and represents the Council and participates in the wider regional prioritisation. It is absolutely critical that the region has a joined up and unified strategy for transport investment. And it's through that forum the region, I sit on that committee as well, makes the decisions about what it wants to achieve in that NLTP period. Also as well feeding into your own district priorities too. What some people don't always realise is we have essentially to bid into this NLTF process as well. We never get what we want either, so we can very much relate to your experience. And we have to bid in for our safety, for our improvements, for our maintenance. It is a highly competitive process for us as the state highway asset owner too. And we do work very closely with your officers as well as with the officers that support the Regional Transport Committee to make sure that we understand what's important for your district on the state highway network that traverses your district too. Much of that is around maintenance and resilience, but also importantly safety. Oh gosh. Oh, I might just miss the important one. Far. Just skipped over it. Funding assistance rates. So this is critical. What do we get here, team? 73. Oh, excellent. I love it. You know, well informed.
74?
I was going to make sure that you knew so I didn't say it wrong. So we do set the funding assistance rates every 3-year period. The board are in that process and will be making the decisions for the funding assistance rates for the 27 to 30 at our August board meeting. This is the proportion of funding that we co-invest and that also then therefore you co-invest as well. Given the current climate and around affordability, both for NZTA, but also for your council and for your ratepayers, this is a critical and a topic of high interest for all of us collectively. You will know as soon as I know where the board land. I would just say that we do a full and robust review. It takes into account a lot of factors from socioeconomic data through to your council's ability to essentially raise the required level of funding and everything in between from the kind of size and state of your assets and what you're seeking to achieve from it. But I guess I'm trying to manage expectations that the the pot's quite skinny on money for us all. And then critically here, what else is your role? Top one for me is make sure that you're familiar with the GPS, absolutely. Also as well, make sure that you're actively contributing through your officers to your bids into the RLTP and the NLTP process. Also too, with what you're bidding in for your assets, make sure that you can afford them, because you do have to contribute to that. It's a need basis, not always a want basis. And again, when we think about the affordability, the potential for rate capping, and everything else that you're having to invest on, the prioritisation and the guidance that you give your officers is critical. Also, if you bid into that and you're successful, and then you can't afford it, you have essentially put that money on hold for somewhere else as well. So we need to just make sure that collectively we have really good assurance across those bids and that investment. We're near the end, I promise. Just one other one, and I'm sure that you're well aware of this. Under the GPS and our government, we did introduce through that some new requirements for all RCAs, road controlling authorities, around reporting both on pothole response, temporary traffic management, and the shift to the New Zealand Guide for temporary traffic management. As well as the work that we do collectively on your audit and insurance assurance. Your funding is contingent on these as well, so there is a reason for them to be required. And just a little wee snapshot of how much we are investing across the region. Even in a fiscally constrained environment, Maratu Wanganui has a forecasted $1.6 billion worth of investment, so it's not small. And the region is seen as critically important, not just in the central North Island, but for the lower North Island. And that's me, you'll be pleased to hear. I hope it was reasonably exciting, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Linda. And that is really helpful. So I'm looking forward to there being, I'm sure there'll be a number of questions. I have a couple here as well. But I do just want to acknowledge the work that you do and the vital relationship that we have, and as our link between NZTA and Council. Councillors will probably be aware, but when there are controversial or disruptive things happening, we do get a heads up through Linda, and through some of those we can also feed back community concerns. Some of the road surface upgrades in Woodville is a really good example, feeding that through where some of the timings of that was changed. It's still disruptive, but to try and lower the impact on some businesses. So I do just want to thank you for that. Also to thank you for being willing to front the community, even on sometimes quite difficult circumstances, although I do feel that we got to know you quite well during one of those controversial topics that we won't talk too much about. Thank you for talking about the far rate. Linda can probably confirm that every time I see Linda in any capacity, I ask about our far rate. Very excited to hear that that is going to 74 cents. Thank you, Linda. That is very, very exciting. I just will ask one quick question, and the Deputy Mayor will go second. When we are looking at the far rate, that obviously is of critical importance to us. One of the criteria for that is Council's ability to pay. What I just wanted to double check is, within that calculation of ability to pay, will the teams be factoring in the likely proposed rates capping that will be impacting all councils? And the reason why I ask is obviously that is not currently in legislation, although it's a fairly strong policy announcement. But will that be part of that consideration of council's ability to pay?
Thank you, and great and timely question. two parts to that. The strategic context that you're operating in absolutely is taken into account and is front of mind. I can say that wholeheartedly in our internal discussions and our discussions with the board. They're well apprised of that. It will be factored in, but as one small component part of the overall decision, given that it's not legislated as yet. Probably, to be very frank, the most critical part of it is the overall affordability for us all, and the priorities of the government and how we balance them. So yes, taken into account, but no, because it's not legislated, we don't know what's coming.
Thank you. I feel like another letter might be coming on. Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Your Worship, and very grateful that you're here, Linda. You're doing a fantastic job. Just as a nice little segue, my question at this stage is about the FAR. And what came to mind very quickly when the announcement was made on the 5th of May that we may well be asked to amalgamate with our neighbours and or anyone else that loves us. Very quickly, around coffee that morning, I discovered that potentially some of our partners that we might be amalgamated with had quite different FARs to us. So I appreciate that there is the demographics of our own particular district, and you said that the board is considering what the future might look like. How might they be approaching the fact that, and I'll just give you the example, I might have got the numbers wrong, but we sit at 73, Rangitikei are at 66, Palmerston North's at 50, something like that. If they become our very close neighbours and part of what we are into the future, what will be the strategy, do you believe, that the board will adopt? Will there still be some consideration of the unique features of the roading networks within each area, or will there be, heck, you're all in this together, we'll just average it all out and there you go? What might be the thinking? It's a big question, I know, but
whip out the crystal ball. It's a real and present question for us all. Largely, it's going to be informed by whatever structures get selected through this process and if and when they come into effect. So, for example, at the moment, we work with a number of different structures for road controlling authorities. Say in Wellington, it's via the Wellington Transport Alliance that is set up that manages that. We have, and I'm responsible for Gisborne, which is a unitary authority and has previously gone through this. So we have experience in working with road controlling authorities in a number of different ways. There's also some discussion as to whether transport could actually be governed through like a CCO model as well. So from our perspective, we have not input or been consulted on the proposal to date. There are a couple of points, I believe, in the DIA briefing with respect to land transport, but we are an operational agency, and once the structure, if they come into effect, we'll be then able to respond to those structures, if you like. If, and probably the easiest example and the one I'm most familiar with, say there was a unitary authority of some size and scale set up here, we would need to work collectively to have a look in kind of a starting position at the size and scale of your assets across whatever that entity was, the state of those assets as well, and we both collectively have all of that data, your population base, the demographics within that, to come up with what would be a revised FAR rate for that RCA. How that is then governed and how that is apportioned for a local road perspective would be up to governance on that. And I'm not going to downplay how challenging that is. And I would encourage you to speak to other unitary authorities because, for example, Nelson Tasman could be another one, but in Gisborne there will always be a tension between the needs of the city to the needs of Wharikahika, for example, right up in the East Cape. But that is governance decision. We would not prescribe that. But it would be a case that we would need to come back and have a look at overall your assets and what's required and make a decision on the appropriate FAR rate from there. So there's still a lot of cars to go over the bridge, under the bridge. Yes.
No, thank you very much. We've got quite a few questions in the queue now. So I'll go Councillor Petty-Weber, then Councillor Wallace, then Councillor Johns, then Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Thanks, Linda, for presenting today. It's good to see you. I just wanted to ask about driver licensing for Tararua. So we currently only get a mobile unit 2 days a month, and that's only in Dennyvuk. So it is hard for our elderly. If you don't get in on those days, then you have to travel to Palmerston North or Waipukurau. And for the youth as well, to renew their licensing or do the tests if they can't get in on those days. Is there any, are we looking at, is there any, because it is pretty busy, I'm just wondering, does the demand drive for us to get more days or a permanent licensing? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question, and probably answer in 2 parts to that. Yes, the permanent service provision is driven by both demand, need, wait times, and also nearby locations, if you like, and ability to travel. So absolutely, yeah, that's how the current, and I would say, let's call it the standard service provision is provided. The mobile testing is essentially, if you like, an add-on to try and relieve some of those pressures and also to drive a little bit more accessibility for rural communities. We have as well, and we are in the process of rolling out the recruitment of more community driver testing officers across the country. But we have, gosh, and I'd need to come back to you on the details, we have just appointed another 2, I think, community driver testing officers in the Manawatu Wanganui area, or maybe it's 4, I need to double check that. They provide not a standard service like you would access through the AE. It does provide a much greater level of pastoral care and is generally aimed more at those with higher service needs than, say, you or I, for example. And that, again, is to augment the current service levels right across the country. But we would need to see, for a permanent place to be established, greater demand or greater need. If you feel like there's areas of the community that are not being well serviced or that we could, NZTA could understand more deeply, I'm happy to pick that up offline and we can get you in touch with the relevant team members within our regulatory area of our business to discuss it. Yep.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Just a simple one. With the global financial and everything else that's happening out there with oil, 94% up in the last 2 months, and it's sitting there. NZTA, that one does that affect your decisions around your table going forward with all these costs?
In reference particularly to fuel security, for example, or overall inflation and escalation?
Both.
Oh, crikey, that's a straightforward but quite big question. The escalation and inflation, we factor in, as you will in your decision making, to a certain extent on an annual and on a 3-year and a 10-year basis. Some areas, particularly around, let's say, aggregate and asphalt, as well as labour and steel, we've seen very significant increases. And also in some areas, it's come back down over the past 2 to 3 years. But generally speaking, our mechanisms have carried us through. We haven't had to adjust substantially our programme. And some of that is as well because of how we set up our commercial contracts for delivery to allow for that escalation. And the same applies for us with the increases that we've seen on diesel and fuel costs as well, that they're either managed through indexation or within the first 12 months of each contract, that kind of increase the contractor has to manage as opposed to us providing further and further funding. So it's been a watch, there has been an impact, but it's not impacted our programme or our service delivery. Probably the greatest impact and the greatest concern for NZTA is because of how we're funded. So because of the fuel excise duty and the road user charges. Over this period, we have seen a change in how people are purchasing fuel and road user charges, which has had an impact materially on how much money is flowing into the National Land Transport Fund. Also critically, it has led the government to consider whether they will or they will not put up the road user charges and fuel excise in the next year. So if that decision is not to increase, that will constrain that fund further than where we are at the minute. So that's probably the more pressing consideration for the government to balance on what they want to achieve through land transport and how it's funded as well. So it's kind of two layers for NZTA.
First? No. Okay, cool. So the GPS for 2027 is being worked on now, but if there's a change in government in November, will that change? Is that likely to change, or is that historically changed with the change of, if there's a change of government?
Great question again. So at the moment we are waiting for a draft GPS to come out for consultation. The Minister and MOT, Ministry of Transport, have been working on that. We don't have a confirmed date for that to come out. If it comes out, we'll move through that consultation process and you and your stakeholders will be notified of that. We obviously have a big moment in November, and the government that is formed post the general election is absolutely entitled to review and to bring out another GPS if they feel that that's required. That would be the likely pathway for that to happen. So it's really a question of whether we get one out prior to the general election or not, which I can't answer.
Thanks, Mayor Scott. No, thanks, Linda. Very well presented.
Thank you.
But a query. The Manawatu Gorge, 8 years ago, NZTA closed it and provided us with an alternative route. 8 years later, it's currently blocked off to NZTA doesn't want people walking through there or cycling through there. They're spending money to prevent people doing such. One would have thought that it would be in NZTA's financial interest to revoke the road as quickly as possible. But 8 years later, nothing's happened. In the meantime, people within the community get very annoyed at gates being put up again. As soon as they're put up, somebody tears them down, but they get put up again, and it all costs money. And it just annoys the shit, it annoys a lot of people. Yes. Can you tell me how far advanced you are in revoking that road?
Just before Linda jumps on, it will come as no surprise that this is of high interest to me and forms some of the discussions we've had. But Linda.
Thank you. Absolutely, we share your frustration, and we also acknowledge the continued support of you as a councillor and your council for not encouraging people to take down those fences and for us to waste ratepayer and taxpayer money on having to keep re-erecting them. So I think anything that we can collectively do to keep our communities safe, but also respect public property and the taxpayers' money to not having to reinstate them, would be very, very welcome. It is a closed asset. We have a brand new state highway or replacement, brand new state highway. And you will be well aware that the monies and the priority for NZTA, since that road was, the original road was closed, was to build the new road. We have been now undergoing what is a statutory process with LINS to look at the future of that section of the old state highway. So there are a number of parts here that have to be considered. There's each end of that and the revocation process back to the respective RCAs. So in this instance, primarily Palmerston North City Council and also Tararua District Council, with your end being a little bit more complicated because of some of the structures involved. So we do have to go through a full process. There is a middle section within there that, as well as going through a risk assessment, there are also 2 privately held land blocks that are to Māori Trust, and we have to go through an engagement process, particularly because any recommendation to say stop that road would essentially landlock those private landowners, so we need to give effect to that as well. And then the role of NZTA is to move through what is a very complex legal process to make a recommendation to LINS. LINS will then decide on the basis of that whether that they agree with that recommendation to retain, to stop, to transfer. And it then moves over from LINS to then engage with whomever else may or may not want to take over the old asset. That process is lengthy, it is complicated, it's a legal and statutory process that we are working and we have a dedicated project team on. I can't give a timeline as to when it will be completed, particularly because of the private landowner engagement and the legal processes that we have to go through on that. But anything that you can do to help us minimise how much has to be spent on making sure that the community is safe and not consistently cutting down the barriers that are there to prevent unauthorised access would be very welcomed, because I wholeheartedly support your concerns about that.
Thank you, Linda. 8 years is a long time. Is it going to take another 8 years to go through this lengthy process that you talk about?
I don't think it would be wise for me to put a cap on that, but I can say that it is of high interest for us, for LINS, and also for the community to move through that process. But I would just note that you have a wonderful shared user pathway that's been created through Te Ahua Turanga that, you know, communities can use and access on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Johns. I thought that may have gone a little bit longer, but very well answered, Linda. Councillor Naylor.
When you're talking about the activity classes, I haven't got a slide number there, where it's broken down to the 7 to, yes, that one there, yeah. You talked about there being an upper and lower limit, and I imagine there's an upper and lower limit on that, but as a percentage, roughly, would it be 5 or 10% range, or is it just too wide that you can't even give us a broad indication?
It varies depending on the activity class and what is contained within each of those activity classes. It is publicly available information on our website. I just haven't put that amount of information on there.
Cool.
But you can see essentially the decision-making range that we have.
Cool.
But it varies per activity class.
Yeah, sorry, and one other question was, we get the FAR rate, which, you know, will be, you know, we could get up to the Ruapehu rate, which would be great, 75%. Nice. Just trying to one-up the mayor there. But then there's that's all very well and good, and, you know, whatever rate we're on. But then we submit as to how much we want to spend, and therefore that goes into contention with everybody else's far rate. I'm just making sure I've got this clear in my head. So we could set a budget of, say, we want to spend $10 million and you're going to give us the balance or whatever that adds up to be. But we may not get that if there's every other council asking for a lot more based on their far rates, and we've got a reduced excise tax, and we've got reduced road user charges and everything else because of an economic climate, let alone the GPS. Have I got all that complexity in my head correct?
Yeah, spot on. I think what is really critical within that is the work that your council officers undertake. And I have to say that your council officers in your alliance run a very tight ship and they do an exceptionally good job. We highly value our relationship with your officers and your council. Balancing probably the mission critical thing is what I mentioned, need versus want in a fiscally constrained environment. So what do you really need? And making sure that you put in the best and fullest possible bids for those, and showing demonstrable alignment with the government policy statement, so those outcomes. Because when they go into the bucket for prioritisation, that is what we're looking at for the return on the investment. How much does this buy us in achieving those government outcomes alongside the needs of your community? So the work that you do, whether it's on your continuous programmes for maintenance or for local road improvements, that case and that bid into the NLTF is the critical part of that to stand you in the best stead. But you're quite right, you could bid in on 10 projects and at the end of the decision making you may only get 2 of those funded. It's a stark reality.
No, thanks very much for that. And we are working through our internal processes as part of that. So thank you very much, Linda. Are there any final questions? Councillor Tuaka.
Tēnā koe, Linda. I have 2 questions. One of my portfolios is the Marae Kōhangareo and Kura Kaupapa portfolio. So my first question is in regards to speed limits in Marae. So I understand that NZTA Wakakotahi is responsible for the state highway part of that kaupapa. So we have a couple of marae that are just off state highways and there's no signage to alert traffic that there's a marae nearby, nor is there really any way to reduce speed during kaupapa like tangihanga and all those sorts of things. I just saw recently the post about Waikato and Raungaiti Marae receiving their speed limit reduction sign during important and big hui and kaupapa such as Tangi. What is the process for our marae receiving some sort of signage on those state highways or something similar to what's happening in Waikato?
Thank you. Great questions and probably 2 answers. We can raise this through your officers with our maintenance and operations team about signage. You'll have noted on some parts of the state highway network we do have authorised signage around Marae, Urapa, almost kind of placemaking, if you like, rather than directional signage, but again, to alert. So it might be a case of timing and when we get those rolled out. So I think we could take that as an action to ensure that we're aware and if we are able to erect that signage. When it comes to the permanent, so say like variable speed limits outside Marae or Urapa, that is a more complicated process under the setting of speed limits rules, which we have to abide by. So permanent reduction or variable speed limits is a much more complex process that the marae that you're referencing, especially if they're off the state highway, may not be eligible for. What we can look at, though, is kind of twofold. If you are, and you're aware for tangihanga or for significant events at your marae, putting in a temporary traffic management. You'll see them sometimes at some marae, but also say some crematoriums across the country also have them for if there are large events happening, that they can put a temporary speed limit in place to lower the speed and alert people. Again, that's quite a process, but that's something that we could take as an action to inquire, especially if you're not eligible for a variable speed limit or a permanent speed limit, just to manage the expectations on all of those, though the setting of speed limits rules and our ability to lower or manage those speeds in the ways that you're indicating, it's a very prescriptive rule, so we would just need to have a look at the if and the how for those particular marae, but we could take that as an action, absolutely, and come back through your officers.
Thank you for that. And can I just ask my second question is, so in Woodville in particular, you've got the new signs in front of Woodville School. Just before Woodville School, if you're coming through from Dannyvirk, there's a kohanga reo there. And one of their questions to me was could the signs have been brought slightly forward so that it could also reduce the speed for the kohanga reo, which is just off the highway as well, and there's no crossing for the babies and parents bringing their kids there. So, yeah.
Unfortunately, it's a very blunt response in no, we're not able to do that for two reasons. The setting of speed limits rule is prescriptive on the distance from the school and the maximum distance that those signs can be implemented, so where we can put them in. And also as well, the distance off the state highway. So if the access to the kohanga reo is off of a local road, the distance off the state highway is also very prescriptive as to where we can extend those variable speed limits. We also too, and I need to double check, but it is prescriptive to primary and secondary schools. It may not take into account kohanga reo.
Thank you.
Not great news, sorry.
Very nice. Any final questions for Linda? Appears to be none. Linda, thank you very much for giving your time. You always have the detail to hand, and we're very, very grateful for you coming and sharing that with Council. So thank you very much. I don't think there are any final questions, but we're very, very grateful to you, Linda. Thank you.
Thank you, and Kapai, really appreciate your time. You've got a lot on, like I said at the beginning, and I genuinely appreciate the opportunity to engage and to hear the questions, and importantly, what's important to you and your communities as well. So thank you very much. Kapai.
Thank you, Linda. Councillors, we now move on to page 61 of your agenda pack, item 11.4, which is the adoption of the 26-27 annual budget and schedule of fees and charges. So invite Sarah and Tracy up to the table. Just before I hand over to Sarah and Tracy, just to reiterate that this has been mostly before Council, when Council went through and adopted our draft. So the draft was unanimously approved through Council. So what I perhaps will ask is that we more focus on any changes that have come through since this Council approved the draft. So thank you very much.
Morena, Your Worship and Councillors. I'm not sure, I think I got the raw end of the stick following Linda. What an amazing presentation that just was. As Scott mentioned, the annual plan was endorsed by you in March. We have made a couple of minor amendments, and I think I have disclosed these within item number 7 of the report. I will just touch on them briefly. One was around a shift for the Paetua pool. When we went in with our operational budgets in the endorsed version, we were anticipating a start date of that facility of 1 January. That was subsequently revised and changed to 1 April 2027. And from that change resulted in a reduction of depreciation costs, a little bit of operational costs, and a minor savings in interest, of which we have utilised per item 7.1.2 to increase the fuel budget As we're all very well aware, we're in a bit of a fuel crisis right now, and council is not immune to that. So we've proposed to increase the fuel budget by 92,000, and then also there is the inclusion of $100,000 for support of internal costs for the transfer of the 3 water services. And then the only other minor tweaks that have taken place is in the fees and charges space, where the solid waste management activity, my apologies, the copy that went out did not have the final revised versions to reflect the budget we had put in, so these have just been tweaked slightly to reflect that. Not major changes, just minor tweaks. In its entirety, council has remained within the 4.83% we set out to achieve. The distribution graph is showing there, and it reflects we're still in a very tight situation, which is really pleasing to see. Tracy, do you have?
I don't actually. It was just focused around the detail of the update from last time, so just here to support if any questions come our way.
And I do have, as you know, how much I struggle with financial years, which is quite ironic given my role, but when you're running 3 financial years in a row, it does get a little bit difficult, so my apologies. On page 92 of your attached agenda, there is a blurb around, or an explanation around Paetua Pool and the changes that I've got in there. I have stated 1 April 2026. It should have been 1 April 2027, so my apologies for that. That is one of the changes that hopefully recommendation 1.3 will allow us to rectify.
Thank you very much for that, Sarah, and thanks for the clarification on that page. I imagine that you've probably saved a question from the Deputy Mayor by clarifying that. We will start off with any questions. Before we do, though, I just want to thank the team for the huge amount of work that goes into this. I'm also very, very glad to see that provision for extra fuel costs have been added into the budget and some of those transition costs. And importantly, that we have stayed within the rates amount that we first envisioned. And that doesn't happen by accident. It takes a lot of work to be able to do that. So please accept our thank you for that work, and please pass that on to all involved, because many people come together to create this. We'll open up for a start with questions. The first, Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Worship. Great job, Sarah and team. As Mayor Scott has directed us, I'm just querying 7.1.3, Sarah, which just asking for some clarification if my memory doesn't focus on it. The inclusion of $100,000 to support internal costs associated with the transfer of the 3 water services. Can you just provide the context, A, why that wasn't there, or B, what's happened since to alert the fact that it does need to be included, if you wouldn't mind? Thank you.
So when we were finalising the figures at the end of last year, there was still a lot of uncertainty of whether we would be able to be supported with internal costs from the Waters project as recoverable costs. That became quite clear by the time we came through and did the final versions on this, that they wouldn't be supporting directly internal costs, that we would incur if we had to get. What the most likely cost is to bring in some staff resourcing support to if there was clashes in all our deadlines. So we decided that we would put in just this little amount. We don't think that there's an excessive amount that we will be experiencing, but it gave all the GMs the opportunity to have the option to bring in some contracting work to support with data work towards providing data to the projects.
Could I just ask a quick follow-up on that, Tracy, if that's okay? Is that provision going to be debt funded and then transferred over to the new entity, or is that OPEX that we will have to absorb?
That's OPEX, which is why we've put it just lately into the budget. And when we saw the opportunity to be saving the costs in the Paetia pool, we thought it was a good time to actually bring that to the forefront. It just gives a little bit of flexibility if the deadlines start to clash amongst all the demands that are going on in the business.
Thank you for having the provision there. One request, not to change the provision, but to make sure that if we are having to spend that it's in line with what the other councils are doing, and that we don't have the ability to be able to package that up and move that when our debt is moved as well. So as long as that is taken into account, be grateful.
Yes, it's a little bit of a moving beast of what we can and can't move across, but they have been pretty clear that we won't be able to do that. Not to say there may be an opportunity of that moving as well. So we will do so.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, at this stage, you're just asking for to put this into the budget so that you can use it if you need to. There's no, you could get to the end of the year, and I can't imagine it somehow, but you could get to the end of the year and you don't need any contractors, but yeah, and so that may not be needed at all, but you're just asking for provision. Okay.
We thought it was more likely to be used than not, which is why we popped it in the budget. But at the same time, there's strong controls around the GM's decisions around whether to bring in external support. At this stage, we've had some clashing deadlines, and we've actually managed to still incorporate that into our working loads. So when we originally thought we wouldn't be able to meet some of those expectations, we actually have. So more likely than not, however, may not need it.
Thanks very much, Tracy. A comment from the Chief Executive.
Just a comment that we should also view this in context of while this provision relates to the transfer of water services, the reality is that part of what's driving this is the wider reform program. It's, as we've discussed previously, it's the same individuals that are working on all of these things, and so this gives us the ability, if we need to use external resources to deliver on what we need to for YT, whilst also doing the other pieces of reform work as well.
And I think that's really good clarification that some of this is potentially a hedge for another unfunded mandate, which we're getting all very, very used to having to deal with. So thank you for that. Any further questions? Appears to be none, so we have the recommendations 1.1 to 1.3. Could I have a councillor who would like to move that? Moved by Deputy Mayor Wards and seconded by Councillor Naylor. Is there any further discussion or debate? Appears to be none, so I'll call the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? The motion is carried. Thank you, and congratulations, team. Well done. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I just want to do a shout out because it's my face, mine and Tracy's face that sit at this table and are publicly accepting your wonderful gratitude and thanks. But there's a bigger team, as you mentioned, and I just want to give a shout out to them. They do amazing things on very tight timelines. So thank you to the wonderful finance and revenue teams.
Thank you. Thank you to yourselves, but absolutely to your teams. It is always a big moment getting through a large piece of work that an annual budget is. And yeah, we are very, very grateful for the efforts involved to everyone. So thank you. Tracy.
I just want to jump on the bandwagon of thank yous now. The window's open. I actually want to say thanks so much to the councillors and the excellent support that we got through this planning process as well. We couldn't have done it without your proactiveness into all our requests and responses and opportunities we put in front of you that you've read and taken seriously and given us great feedback to get to those numbers we wanted to get to. So always appreciated from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. That's much appreciated, Tracy. Thank you. Excellent. Now we move on to do some admin in relation to the annual budget. So page 75, item 11.5, the rates resolution for the 26-27 financial year. This is in the name of Sarah, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, it is a formality that we need to go through for us to be able to set the rates come 1 July. Just wanted to provide a bit of extra reassurance that this has gone through about 5 different reviews, 5 different checks. Audit have had a copy of this. The initial team have done their initial assessment and it is sitting with sign off with the director. To my knowledge, no items have been raised. Just wanting to give that little bit of assurance as we head into this recommendation.
That assurance is much appreciated, so thank you, Sarah. Are there any questions on this paper? Appears to be none. Could I please get someone to move the significant number of recommendations that go through? Moved by Councillor Wallace. Could I have a seconder, Councillor Amboy? Is there any discussion or debate? I'll call the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you very, very much, team. Really appreciate that. Excellent. We now move to page 85, item 11.6, wastewater remission correction, rates remission policy, also in the name of the Finance and Revenue Manager. So welcome, and also welcome to the table, Jess.
Thank you, Your Worship. Quite clearly, I wanted today to be my day. My apologies for the back-to-backs, and just wanted to welcome my colleague, wonderful colleague Jess here. As you would have seen from reading the report, it's a very technical and procedural report, which I'm sure you would expect nothing less from the two of us sitting at this table. If you don't mind, we would like to take the opportunity to try and simplify it because there is a lot of technical jargon in there. And Jess is going to take that one for the team.
No, thank you, Jess. And it will be great to be very, very clear on the recommendation that has been made. And thank you for being clear as to the recommendation, but explaining why that is the recommendation. So I appreciate that. I'll hand it back over to Jess.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, councillors. We're still morning, yeah. So as Sarah mentioned, this is a very technical and procedural driven report, and we do want to acknowledge that it was quite complex perhaps to read. So this was a conversation we had where we thought we should probably simplify it. So I'm going to do my best attempt now to do that for you, and obviously after that, following that, we're happy to take any questions about it. So basic explanation of what we're saying has happened here is that we mistakenly left a statement in the long-term plan in the published version saying that the school wastewater emissions would be removed from the 25-26 year, so year two of the LTP. Although Council's direction at the workshop immediately prior to that LTP consultation document going out was not to remove the remission, so to keep the remission as it is, and that was based on some information that was provided to them at that point. And then we also, when we adopted the LTP, Council's direction following that workshop was that the remission was not to be removed. It just slipped through. And it's just a little statement, and I think we have put the statement in the report so you can see exactly what we're referring to. In practice, we have kept applying the remission. So that was applied this year. The first year, obviously, of the LTP was as it was supposed to be, and it was applied. The second year, when the published LTP says we should have removed it, it was applied again. In line with Council's direction, but not in line with what the LTP said. So we have a mismatch between what the policy says in the published document and what the direction was and what Council intended. So we're not actually suggesting that there's a change to the policy. We're just correcting a misstatement, which is just that little piece that says that we will remove it from the 25-26 year. If we leave it, essentially we just create some legal and audit risk that is unnecessary. So we, for the remainder of the LTP, and I think that's important. We're obviously in a process where we're about to go through and develop we are developing a new LTP, we're about to adopt it It's a bit presumptuous of me to say, but we are getting there. So we don't have that much longer to carry this mistake. However, it's important, I think, now that we've seen it, to fix the error. So that's what we're intending to do today. Well, we're recommending that we do today. The other options, and you will see that there's a number of options that we've considered through this report in quite some detail, and I apologise for that, but that's how we work, the two of us. They'd either take too long, they are too complex, or they might cost too much. So on the balance, we've considered the risks, and we've also considered what is a practical solution to this misstatement, essentially. And the fact that if we do not take the recommended option, we do have some operational things that we need to unwind in the background before the end of the month for the 25-26 year. So our simple recommendation is to correct the error formally, which is what we're asking council, recommending to council to do. So formally state that what our intention was and to correct the error, and do that before 30 June for the 2025 year, and then carry that over for the 26-27 year. That being said, I just want to signal a minor amendment to the recommendation, if I may. So 1.4, we're going to get this right. 1.4, we have recommended that the Tararua District Council adopts option 2A, which is revocation and alteration of the remission policies to adopt without the statement. Simple language, formally correct the statement. However, option 2A relates to the 26-27 year, and we actually want to, we recommend that we make the correction from this year, i.e. prior to the 30 June. So we could either say adopts option 2A and 7A, or we could say adopts 7A, or we could combine them. So we could amend the recommendation to say adopts option 2A and 7A, or we could amend 1.4 to say adopts option 7A, and that would correct the statement in this year, which would have the same effect for the 26-27 year. So that apologies for that error, but we have caught it before we made the recommendation. So that's all I had to say. But Sarah, did you have anything, or otherwise we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I think that probably adding 7A into there is the tidiest way, but we'll see where questions go. We'll start with Councillor Wards.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the simpler explanation. Has there been, on a practical level, has there been any unintended consequences for this, for our schools? Have they paid something or not paid something that we have to unwind?
Through you, Your Worship, if option 7A is accepted by council, then no. If option 7A is not, then we would have to undo the remissions that we have applied to the schools, and it's a substantial amount of work that we would need to be doing in not much time, with the 30th of June next week.
Any further questions? I will ask someone to move the motions 1.1 down to 1.4, with 1.4 having the addition of and 7A. Could I have someone to move that? Councillor John, seconded by Councillor Corlett. Is there any debate or discussion? Councillor Naylor.
I'd just like to say I'm pleased with the simple explanation, because it was doing my head in last night trying to work my way through it. But my question was going to be exactly the same as Sharon. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for the obvious effort that you put into figuring out what seems to be a practical solution. Good on you. Well done.
Thank you. And just a quick comment from me. Yes, it was a very detailed report, it would be fair to say. However, it is important to make sure that we have all of the information before us to make the decision. So I'm grateful for that, but like my colleagues, I'm also very grateful for the explanation that was given. So thank you very much, team. If there's no further discussion or debate, I'll call the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, motion is carried. Thank you, councillors, and thank you very much, Sarah and Jess. We now move on to page 101, item 11.7, and these are the remits to Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting. This paper is really about indicating whether council should support or not support certain remits that are going forward to become policy positions of local government New Zealand. We have some options as we go through these, having sat through a few of them in the previous council. It may well be that we decide to support the remit or not to support the remit, which is fine if that is really clear. Sometimes the outcome might depend on debate. So we might be a little bit borderline with it. And when it comes to the annual general meeting, the movers of the remits get to speak to their remit, and people can speak in opposition to the remit as well. So an option before us is, if you're not sure, you can resolve to leave it to the delegates to make the decision once they've heard that discussion. And each time this has come through beforehand, there has always been some that has been left to the discretion of the delegates. So I just wanted to make that clear. If there are any that will require, that is clearly a split, we will call division, and we will vote on them by division. So just to be clear on that. Ellie, did you have anything else you wanted to add, or have I covered what you needed to? Perfect. All right, let's start with one second. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was just getting some clarification. Because the annual general meeting is held separately to the conference this year, usually it would be the conference attendees that would become the delegates, so I'm just working out how that works. Recommendation 1.2, we might just deal with that first, so we are all clear. That would be that the Tararua District Council appoints myself as Mayor, and councillors, I would like to nominate the Deputy Mayor as my alternate. Is anyone else wanting to be an alternate? We can have 2 alternates. Does anyone have a desire to be an alternate? Councillor Naylor is the only one to put up their hand, or Councillor... Okay, well, we can have a vote on who they will be. Are you still wanting to, if there's a vote, guys?
Yes, so myself will speak with.
Yes, so, and between, so Sharon, yourself, and actually all of us, we can have a vote on that. So there's 3 spots.
I'm happy to withdraw.
Okay.
You could have all 3 as alternates, but only one person can vote.
Oh, so we could have all 3 as alternates? Let's do that then.
Okay, so there's some
Great.
votes going on.
Brilliant, that sounds fantastic. So let's just deal with recommendation 1.1 first, and 1.2, that the Tararua District Council appoints Mayor Scott Gilmore and councillors Wards, Wallace and Naylor as its delegates to attend the Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting held on 31 July 2026. Could I get someone to move those? Councillor Corlett, seconder. Councillor Amboy, any discussion? Sorry, Alan.
Sorry for that one. I was thinking about number of alternate. You can have, you can only have 2 extra people attend the AGM because that is limited to numbers.
Okay, sorry, I've just received some extra advice. Councillor Naylor, are you still okay to withdraw? Thank you very much. So it would be myself, Councillor Wards and Councillor Wallace. Are you still happy to move that, Councillor Corlett? Are you still happy to second that, Councillor Amboy? Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Recommendation 1.3, I probably should have covered in there, and 4. So we'll just cover those as well with the same as the others. Moved by Councillor Corlett. Councillor Amboy, are you happy to add that in? Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Now we move into the direct remits. So let's start with the priorities for dog control reform, which is the first remit. Is there any discussion on this remit?
Happy to leave it to the delegates.
Thank you. Does anyone have a alternate view? Councillor Naylor.
It seemed to me quite sensible. I'd be happy to support it, but also happy to leave it to the delegates in case something popped up that made it unsupportable. But yeah, I think we've heard from our own animal control officers about how challenging it can be in some situations, and this seems to open up the opportunity for them to be able to do more. So I'm happy to support it.
Any other viewpoints? So we have, do you want to move that we support it? Do we have a seconder, Councillor Corlett? Any further discussion? I'll call the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Seems unanimous, so we will be supporting Remit 1. Item 2, I'm sure this will be just as non-controversial. Number 2, improved regulation for vape retail.
Gladly support.
So Councillor Wallace would like to support that. Does anyone have a contrary view or wish to speak to this one? Councillor Corlett.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. I'm not opposed to the health of the public and our general ratepayers, but the Act has already been updated through the Smoke Free Act, and higher penalties and tighter controls have been put in place only in 2024-25. So I'm against this remit.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this one? Councillor Johns.
I'm with Councillor Collett, and I'm opposed to it.
Councillor Kennedy.
I agree with Councillor Peter. And
any other comments? It has been moved originally by Councillor Wallace of supporting, that was your view. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Wallace's? Councillor Amboy would also like to. So now we'll just move into debate. This is one, by the way, that was emailed around to councillors, so it's not surprising that there's a different viewpoint because we were unable to get a majority of councillors, so that's why it's coming here. Councillor Tuaka.
I'm with Councillor Steve Wallace and Amboy on this one. I do acknowledge the acts such as the Smoke Free Act, but it's not stopping the issue at hand. And as one of the youth portfolio holders, it's a real problem in our community. And a lot of the funding through Smoke Free does not support vapes currently within our community through our health organisations. It's very hard to find support for vaping in this area. Kia ora.
Thank you. Councillor Amboy.
Thank you, Ms Scott. This is just a follow-up to Councillor Kishan's comments. I also think that being in a small rural district, we experience higher levels of deprivation and healthcare inequity, and we need every available tool to be able to help reduce nicotine addiction among young and vulnerable people. I also believe that this gives councils greater control when it comes to stronger compliance and a more localised approach to breaches that could take place instead of relying on centralised systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Amboy. Councillor Petty-Webber.
Thank you, Ms Scott. I support this remit. To help drive this even further, we'll need to look at our own smoke-free policy for the Tararua area as well, and that will help strengthen this remit in our area.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Kennedy.
Sorry, I'm just going to say from my perspective as working in health, education, and I think people need to have that informed consent, know the risks, and that's where primary health nurses and even district nurses come in, is giving people that advice to make their own informed decisions on what is risky behaviour.
Any further? Councillor Corlett.
Just a couple of comments around the proposed changes in the remit. Most of them are around the location of vape stores or facilities or other things. It doesn't actually provide funding, and there's no direction of any further assistance in health specifically. It is mostly around what is visible, what is seen, and where they are. And I don't see that as being something that would change vaping in our communities. Being that we have small towns, I really wouldn't see a change there.
Councillor Johns, then Councillor Wallace.
I concur with Councillor Corlett's comments on that. Education is the way. Big brother attitude is I'm totally opposed to.
Councillor Wallace.
Yes, I think if education worked, we wouldn't have this conversation, but as we know, we're humans and we're sheep, we follow, and we're always doing it after the fact. We saw vape shops come, and look what happened. We should have known those kids were going to get affected. So I'm still where I sit.
Yeah. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, in the remit there it talks about 73% being, or 71% being within 800 metres of schools. And I know in some of our areas that might make it difficult for people to get their supplies of vapes because, you know, there isn't 800 metres clearance, particularly Woodville. But I also acknowledge the points about, education, but a lot of these people aren't getting exposed to education. They aren't exposed to the district health nurses or the other things, particularly these young people. So, they haven't got to a situation where they're ill yet, and we want to try and prevent them from getting ill. So I'm supporting Mr. Wallace on this one, and Councillor Wallace.
Wish to add?
Just one thing. Vaping's one thing. I hear what you say, and no argument against that. But what's next? Sugar drinks, lollies. Where do you draw the line? And who are we to say what people should or shouldn't do?
I'll allow one final, usually we will have one debating point, but seeing as I allowed you a second, I'll also allow Councillor Wallace.
I think we've got to remember we're dealing with cognitive diffidence here. Those kids don't understand the future, what's going to happen to them.
Thank you. I'm just going to make a point as well with this. Frankly, I do not support the remit, but I respect colleagues' views that they do. I believe that there is already central government regulation and legislation that's come into place that does solve some of the challenges that have been put forward within the remit, including visibility in particular being an issue. This remit will not increase any support to those that might need help with addiction services, and actually that is a central government responsibility as well. I do not see this as the role of councils to be involving themselves in. That's my personal view. So I feel like we are going to need to call a division because it is clear that we have differing views. So I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to call a division, please.
We'll move around the table to my left. Councillor Wards.
I don't support the remit.
Councillor Amboy.
I support this remit. Thank you.
Councillor Johns.
I don't support.
Councillor Corlett.
I'm against.
Councillor Tuaka.
I support it.
Councillor Naylor.
I support it.
Councillor Petey Webber.
I support.
Councillor Kennedy.
I don't support this remit.
And Councillor Wallace.
I support.
And your worship.
I do not support the remit. So thank you. We have 5. It is a split, which is reflective of what came through via email. I don't want to use a casting vote for this, but I feel like I may well need to, as the only way to split the vote. So I will stay consistent that we do not support the remit. Item 3, less controversial. Financial support for government reform implementation costs. I'm happy to move that we support this one. Seconded. Sorry, Councillor Naylor beat you to that. Is there any discussion? Appears to be none. Okay, all those in favour say aye. Against? That is carried. Remit number 4, removal of representation review requirements during simplifying local government reform. Does anyone have any views on whether we should support or not support this remit? We'll go Councillor Naylor, then Councillor Wallace.
When I read this one, it sort of confused me a little bit because, you know, we have got to almost carry on with our standard process because we are obliged to by law, and seeking some way to be able to not have to do it. You know, it just was confusing to me. I'm struggling with this one, and you know, it makes sense in some ways to seek it, but in other ways it doesn't. So I'm sitting on the fence, and I'm wondering if this one might be one that we actually leave to the delegates to actually be able to make a decision after the discussion, because I think there'll be plenty of discussion around it.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. I'll go Councillor Wallace, then Councillor Tuaka.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Naylor. I was a little bit in the fog, but I do support it.
Thank you. So, okay, that's different to Councillor Naylor's. You want to support it? I do. Great. Councillor Tuaka.
Yeah, I support Councillor Naylor's kōrero to allow for our representatives to make a decision on our behalf.
Thank you, Councillor Johns.
And I'm with Councillor Naylor and Councillor Tuaka.
Any other commentary? Councillor Naylor put that first, so we can vote on that. My view, I feel like the remit seems quite sensible. to me, but certainly open to hearing what the discussion is. Councillor Naylor, would you like to put your motion and we'll see if we can get a seconder?
Yeah, I move that the remit number 4 be left to the delegates to make the decision at their time after the discussion.
Thank you. And Councillor Tawaka, you are seconding that. Is there any further debate or discussion? I'll call the vote then. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Item 5, are you ready again, Mr Chief Executive? The devolution of place naming authority to territorial authorities. Would anyone like to give a view with this? Councillor Tawaka.
I appreciate that we were sent this earlier, and it's been good to hear everybody's views, and you guys know my views. I support this remit, but I also respect the informal sort of vote that's taken place via email. But yeah, I just wanted to let community and you guys know that I support this remit.
I think just to clarify, I mean, this is absolutely the time where we can be publicly debating this. When it goes via email, that is to ensure that if our name goes on as a supporter for the remit, that I can be assured that we have majority support. And this was one that we didn't have clear majority support, but I certainly appreciate your view. Councillor Johns.
I'm with Councillor Tawaka. I support the recommendation. As in the notes, it talks about local people are closer to the action. Once again, they should have the right to make the decision, these sorts of decisions, not some bureaucrat in Wellington.
Thank you, Councillor Johns. Councillor Corlett.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. As we've already talked about this, I still stand as against this. There is a process in place for the application of a name change. It goes to mana whenua, it goes to local communities and councils for a decision. So I do support, I'm against this remit.
Thank you for that. We'll go Councillor Amboy, then Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Ms Scott. Personally, I don't support this remit. I'm with Councillor Chris on this. I think this remit has some really good intentions behind it, especially when it comes to localism, but we have to consider if we go into an amalgamation, the naming authority would likely sit with the new larger regional authority, not the smaller district councils, which this remit is intended to do. And also, as Councillor Chris said, there is a consultation process which happens before any name changes occur. So I think that's it's a good platform for people to have their say in that space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Amboy. Councillor Naylor.
My concern is quite different. My concern is that we end up with a debacle of names being managed by 64 different territorial authorities, and all of a sudden somebody's calling something and nobody else knows what it is because there's no national distribution of the name and no register or record of it. Or, I mean, there will obviously be a register or record, but I can just see it getting as confusing as hell. So that's why I'm against this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Naylor. See any other views? This one is a really interesting one in my view, and I am quite struck by how interesting some of the commentary is of the localism part of it. And I know that where this has come from was an attempt by a council to go through the consultation process to make a change and to be supported locally, and then to have the minister, the LINZ minister, then say no on balance. So I certainly have some sympathy for why Far North District Council were keen to have this supported. It does seem that we don't have a clear view on this yet, so I will hand back to the Chief Executive to call a vote on it.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll go round to my left. As before, Councillor Wards.
I am against this proposal.
Councillor Amboy.
I don't support this remit. Thanks.
Councillor Johns.
I do support the remit.
Councillor Corlett.
I'm against.
Councillor Tuaka.
I support.
Councillor Naylor.
I'm against.
Councillor Petty-Webber.
I support this remit.
Councillor Kennedy.
I don't support this remit.
And Councillor Wallace.
I don't support.
And Your Worship.
I do support this, but it looks like it is a 4-6 that council will not be supporting, but I would like mine recorded as being supportive, please. Item number 6, thank you for that, councillors. Enhanced role for government in supporting subnational diplomacy. Thank you very much for that mouthful, Mayor Grant Smith. Any discussion on this remit?
Leave it to the delegation. I move that we leave this one to the delegation to make a decision at the annual general meeting.
Thank you. I think Councillor Johns already did move that, but I'm happy to take you as a seconder. I'll be the judge of that. Thank you, Councillor Naylor. Is there any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you. Item 7, bulk funding of transport activities. Any discussion on this? Councillor Corlett first and then Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Looking at it, it sounds like a good idea, but I think for us, I'm against it. I feel it would put a bit of a risk to our whā. We already get a lot. Why would we, ask for more?
Thank you, Councillor Corlett. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, I think this one's a delegate question because I just need delegation question, I should say. I just haven't got enough information there to be happy with it.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Naylor.
I think I'm supporting Councillor Corlett with this one. There's a couple of things. One is that we have got a good whā rate, but also we have got a great Tararua alliance and relationship, and I would worry how, if it was bulk funded, that this might have an impact on it. So, yeah, I'm against, yeah.
Any further comments? We'll start. Councillor Corlett, you're just happy to move that we do not support. A seconder for Councillor Corlett, Councillor Wards. Any further discussion, particularly for people that believe that we should? I haven't heard yet anyone advocate for us to accept the remit. Appears to be none, then I'll call the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried, thank you. So we will not be supporting that remit. Number 8, been looking forward to this. Improving LTP audit requirements. To flag now, our name is on this remit as supporting it. This is one that I was able to get agreement very, very quickly on. But just to double check, is there any commentary on this? Appears to be none. I'm happy to move this one as well. Seconded by Councillor Corlett. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. And a big thank you to Gisborne District Council for raising that and articulating it in such a good way. Remit number 9, a fairer approach to uneconomic transport infrastructure funding. Any commentary on this one, councillors? Councillor Naylor.
This one seemed to be very much in support of Stratford, and not everybody else. So Yeah, while I understand what they're trying to say, I think this is one that could definitely be left to the delegation to make a decision after further discussion, because I'm sure there'll be lots of good discussion about this.
Thank you for that. Any contrary views? Appears to be none. Would you like to move that? It's left to the delegates?
Yeah, I'll move that we let the delegates select. Yeah.
Great. Seconded by Councillor Johns. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. I managed to get through that quicker than I thought. Oh, there we go. Yes. Apologies. I missed recommendation 1.5, which is detailed in the report. And that is that the Tararua District Council either supports or does not support the proposed rule change to allow networks to submit remits to the Local Government New Zealand annual meeting. So currently, and this is detailed at 4.8 of your agenda, any of these remits do need to come via councils or via zones. And these networks are not able to propose their own, even though they're made up of a large number of elected members. Does anyone have any commentary on this proposed rule change? Councillor Naylor.
And just a question, does this impact us directly at all? I'm trying to think.
Yes, it does. We have members of our council that are members of LGNZ networks. So indirectly, there is. One thing to say though, which is important to note, this does not mean that remits get approved necessarily. This is just a mechanism of being able to raise a remit by right, rather than it having to go back to a constituent council or zone. Councillor Tuaka.
I like the idea. I think that it could bring, I don't know, we will have shared concerns and ideas in those groups, which I think aren't always addressed in our councils. And again, it's supposed to be brought back here anyway. And in those forums, we're not the voices on behalf of our council. So I think that that's, for me, if I'm sitting in Te Maruata and I'm making a decision, it's not on behalf of council, it's on behalf of Te Maruata or the game. So I think that this is a cool opportunity for our GNZ.
Very good. Any, Councillor Amboy.
I'm with Councillor Kashan on this one, just in terms of being able to represent marginalised groups, especially youth and Te Maruata. It's so important that we have a say, even though it's just to have a say. It doesn't necessarily go into action straight away or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm fully supportive of this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Amboy. I'm in support of the rule change because really what it does is it provides a mechanism for it to go to the AGM for full debate. If it's an idea that's unpalatable to other councils, it will not be approved. So I don't have an issue with that. Does anyone wish to speak against that rule change? Okay. Could I get someone to move that we do that? Councillor Tuaka, seconded by Councillor Amboy. Any further or final discussion? Appears to be none, so all those in favour please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. And just to check with our Manager of Democracy Services, have we covered all of those? Great. We've covered all of those. So thank you. These can often take quite a long time to go through the remits, so I certainly appreciate everyone's consideration of these. We now move to page 145, item 11.8, requests for information under the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 in the name of the Manager of Democracy Services.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The report on your agenda, I'll take that as read. It sets out requests for information that we've received over the past month. June's actually been a very quiet month. We didn't get our first Lagoima request until the 12th of June. That's Not happened before.
Are there any questions for Ali? Appears to be none. Could I get someone to please move recommendation 1.1? Councillor Wallace, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Is there any further discussion or debate? Just to make a comment similar to my usual comment with this, to thank you, Ali, and to the team for all of the work that goes into responding to Lagoima's. It can be a real team effort, but it can also be a substantial amount of work. Super important, though, for transparency, so I'm very, very grateful for your work. I'll put the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We just now move to page 153, which is correspondence. We have included in there the reply from Minister Simon Watts to my earlier letter to him. My earlier letter to him was included in the agenda pack for our extraordinary council meeting, but I thought it was important to have the reply. I'll be making some commentary about that in the Merrill Matters section, so we can have some discussion there. We now move to portfolio.
Motion to receive that letter? Correspondence?
Sure. Recommendation. So I'm happy to move that we receive the letter of response from the Honourable Simon Watts regarding simplifying local government reforms, seconded by Councillor Petty Webber. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We now move into portfolio reports. The first being Community Connections Chair, Councillor Petty Webber. Do you wish to speak to your report?
Thank you, Mayor Scott. It's just a brief report about the event that's held in Palmerston North for the central area. We don't, as a council, we don't financially support this event, but they allow our, volunteers in our community to put forward people that they think are deserving of awards. It is a great event, well organised by Volunteer Central, and we had 3 recipients there. This could be something that we could look at in the future, holding a Tararua one and bringing all the voluntary awards that we do in each area together, plus civic awards. So just flagging that. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Councillor Erina, and thank you for heading along to that at reasonably short notice. Very, very, very grateful for you to be able to do that. Are there any questions for Councillor Erina on her report? Appears to be none. Councillor Erina, are you happy to move your report? Could I get someone to second that, please? Councillor Kennedy. No further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. We now move to page 157, the youth portfolio report written by Councillor Amboy. Councillor Amboy, would you like to speak to your report?
Thank you, Ms. Scott. So this report just outlines what Councillor Kashan and I have been doing these past few months. But since then, personally for me, priorities have shifted on the focus of on conversations around amalgamation and how we can bring youth involved within those discussions and the importance of it regardless of what happens in future. But also there is something in the works that we have planned along with Mayor Scott in the next week or so, which will be shared with everyone soon. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Amboy. Everyone will be very intrigued, which is great. Are there any questions for Councillor Amboy? Appears to be none. Councillor Amboy, are you happy to move your report?
I move the report is read.
Great.
And taken.
And a seconder with Councillor Tawaka. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you very much to the Youth Portfolio for all of the work that you're doing in that space. We now move to page 159, which is Portfolio Report for Marae, Kohangareo and Kura, in the name of Councillor Tawaka. Would you like to speak to your report?
Yes, so again, we're still on our mission to visit every single marae in the district. We've got 2 left, though we have been invited to a lot of kaupapa at Makirikiri marae, and we're quite connected with the whānau out there, so we haven't formally gone in as council, but we've still been invited into the space and with the whānau out there. We plan to present a full report on our visits within the next couple of months, and I'm really excited to share that with you all. This kaupapa has been huge, but it has been extremely, I think, successful because a lot of my personal connections to marae are in the south. So being able to go and visit a lot of our northern marae and put faces to the committees and whānau out there have been extremely valuable for me. And I really appreciate marae for allowing both myself and Edina into their space as council as well. So that's been pretty cool. There has been another kaupapa that has come up. So a couple months ago, some students from Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Tāmaki Nui Aroa wrote formal letters to myself as the council and as the Māori board. And tomorrow, both myself and Ms. Scott will be presenting our responses to the students. So I will write more detailed kōrero about that in my next report, but I'm really excited to formally respond to these rangatahi who have brought forward issues faced by rangatahi in our district. So I look forward to speaking more to that next month. Kia ora.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Tawaka. Are there any questions for Councillor Tawaka? Are you happy to move your report? Could I get a seconder, Councillor Corlett? Actually, I'll do Councillor Pete Weber as the co-portfolio holder. Apologies. Any further discussion? I do just want to pass on my thanks to you both for the work that you're doing and the connections that you're making. Some of those connections sometimes can be quite challenging for council to make. So thank you for using your own connections and influence on behalf of council to do that. Right, I'll call the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, councillors. Just move to mayoral matters. Apologies that I don't have a written report. I completely ran out of time. It's been a fairly busy period for many of us, but I did still want to give an update. First off, an update on reform. You will see the letter from Minister Watts, which we received in correspondence. My view of that is it does present a softening in language, and I'm grateful for the Minister for putting that in writing as he committed to do verbally with me. It does give some assurance that if we did end up in the backstop process, that is intended to be similar to the original simplifying local government policy that they first consulted on, and reminding councillors that we did submit on that, generally in support of the process of having up to 2 years to develop regional reorganisation plans, and with those not necessarily having to be amalgamation, either shared services or amalgamation models. That's not to say that we should not still have a level of caution, because the language has been changing, and we do need to remember that the language was quite firm not very long ago. we have received some modelling for Wairapa, which has been emailed out and being shared. We're waiting to see more information of what Tararua might look like within that mix. There is some further information and modelling coming from Horizons. For that to be meaningful, we need to have a better understanding of what the costs are from the regional council functions that are getting delivered into each area, but that will be shared. The Chief Executive has, through my request, set up a meeting with the rural mayors within the Horizons region, so we will be having those soon. And my phone is running quite hot from mayors around the country at the moment as councils are getting out to their communities. They are realising, some are realising that perhaps this will not be as straightforward as what they thought it might be, and some of them are getting very, very clear messages from their communities. So there is still some work going on there, but I will continue to keep councillors updated on everything that's happening. Just to thank Councillor Wards, who went along to the stakeholder forum and Waiti Waters board meeting. I was unable to go to that because I've been asked to join the Wastewater Investment Accelerator program. That's a program run through the Department of Internal Affairs, and it's looking at how we might look at joint procurement and joint consenting for wastewater treatment plants, which we all know are horrifically expensive for councils to deliver by themselves. In effect, it's a shared service, but one that's being led by government, and that could save hugely material and significant amounts of money for wastewater treatment. So that's a time commitment that I've that I'm now on, and will require some travel to Auckland, not paid for by our ratepayers, I will say, but an important piece, and one that I think can be replicated into other things, potentially bridges, all sorts of things. Good to see government involved here, because if government genuinely wants to make local government more efficient and more affordable, these are the things that will shift the dial, and they will shift the dial much, much more than a cookie cutter amalgamation ever would, in my particular view. So I just wanted to keep council updated on that. Yesterday I attended the Wellington Regional Leadership Forum, which I've had an invite to attend as an observer, which is very helpful to see as they look at their regional spatial plans, which is what was on the agenda, but how some of that, particularly with transport, can intersect into our region. And when we come to economic development, I'm very grateful to be able to be in the room to hear those discussions directly. And finally, I just wanted to pay tribute and give thanks to members of Woodville Art and History for the incredible job that they did over the weekend in commemorating the 100th anniversary of the death of Gottfried Lindau. Lindau being one of New Zealand's most notable artists, and someone who spent 36 years of his life as a resident in Woodville and is buried in Woodville. It was a very big occasion over 2 days. We had the Czech ambassador travel from Canberra to come and take part in the commemorations, the Czech consul based in Sydney, the Honourable Czech consul from Auckland, the Colombian honorary consul visit, The Honourable Kieran McAnulty was in attendance. It really did not just the town of Woodville, but the district proud. I have written a letter of thanks to the committee for all of the work that they've done, and I'll have that included as outward correspondence in our next council meeting. Didn't have time to get it into this agenda. So that's a bit of a around the room for me. Is there any questions on that update? Appears to be none, and it's not in the formal report, so we don't have to move anything. Very good. Double checking on missing bits today. Great, sorry, just double checking where we're going. Okay, councillors, we now will move into public excluded. Could I please have a councillor move us into public excluded? Councillor Tawaka, seconded by Councillor Wallace. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Thank you very much for that, councillors. That brings us to the end of our council meeting. I'd like to now invite Councillor Tuaka to close us with a karakia, please.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki a ihu karaite ko te aroha o te atua me te whiwhika tahitaga ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmere.
Thank you very much, councillors. Thank you, Councillor Tuaka. Thank you very much, councillors, and thank you very much, council staff. That is the end of our meeting.